Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this webinar. My name is Sarah Jacobson, and I'm today's host. I am the co-founder and CEO of FairStreet. Thanks so much for tuning in during AEP when I know this is an incredibly busy time for everyone, but also this question of how Part D is changing is also really relevant this time of year. So with that, I'm incredibly excited to introduce our speaker Maggie Stett of Stett Insurance. Maggie is both an independent Medicare agent working with clients and a past president of the California NAHU chapter, and she's incredibly involved with the organization. Today, she'll be speaking about upcoming changes to Part D and how to find drug discounts for your clients. So all of your drug questions will get answered today. A few housekeeping items. This class is recorded, so take notes, but we will be sending out the recording later. And if you have any questions, please hold them to the end and put them into the Q&A feature. I will be keeping track of the questions that come up and make sure that we get them answered.
Printed. Oh.
Lastly, this class is hosted by FairStreet. FairStreet is a startup FMO and CRM platform that helps independent Medicare agents manage their clients all in one place. You can send custom intake forms, quote and enroll in all the plans, record calls, and more. So with that, let's dive in. Maggie, welcome. And we're so excited to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you all. I'm going to hit my share screen and bring this up for you. And if you give me just a moment, I will put it on presentation. So what we're going to do today is take a trip through just some basic about Part D, but the most exciting part is there's some great news in the Medicare arena in prescription drugs, thanks to the Inflation Act, but also to some changes by Medicare as well. So I understand that this will be available for you to review. So hopefully you can learn by this. I'm also going to send you, I'll be sending to Sarah to share with you a list of all the discount companies. So this includes the one you're used to, like GoodRx, but there are so many others involved as well that are coupon providers. And we'll talk a little bit about the manufacturing programs, such as for Eliquis and that, how you can help your clients. So with that, let's get going. So where do you go for information? If you're in the Medicare arena, I call it, if you're a Medicare focused agent, these are your textbooks. You really need to know those books. You can order them from Medicare. They are on the Medicare website, so you can download them. You're used to the Medicare and You Guide that's new every year. And what you may not know is the copy at the end of the year does give you a list of all the plans available in the area for that individual. So they're taking and looking at what their zip code is, ideally their county, and they have a list of all the plans that are available and information about it, which is also great for you. The choosing a Medigap policy, you do need to give to any applicant who is looking at a Medigap or Medicare supplement plan. And then, of course, the websites for Medicare and Social Security are also available for you as well. And you can find so much information on Medicare.gov and Social Security.gov. The other booklet that's very, very important for you to have and read and know is called Who Pays First? Because when you're dealing with large group and small group, you need to know, and retiree plans and veterans and workers' comp and all of that, those answers are in that Who Pays First booklet. So again, it's a booklet you can order, you can download, but that is one that is so important for you to have in your library and know and refer to. So just a reminder, what is Medicare? So Medicare started back in 1965. And when I meet with my seniors or I do seminars, I always ask, I say, do you know who received the first Medicare card? Who was the first signer in Medicare? So stop and think. It was signed in 1965 by President Johnson. So who was there to sign it? It was President Truman. He received the first Medicare card. But interestingly, in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., down in the museum, underneath all the meeting areas, there's actually a picture of the first civilian recipient of the Medicare card. And she was 106 and down in Alabama, and she received the second Medicare card. And so it's kind of fun to share this with your people when you're talking to them, that this actually started in 65. And I always remind my people, and I said, that FICA you've been paying all these years, that's what you've been paying to get your Medicare and your Social Security. So finally, all that investment you've paid into FICA is coming out to take care of you. So Medicare, as you know, is made up of 4 parts, really 5, because they're now saying Medicare supplements they consider as Part E. So we have A, which is facilities, that's the hospital, skilled nursing, hospice, which I tell people is one of the best things that Medicare has come out with, is hospice care. Part B, that's your doctors, your x-rays, your lab, your chemo, your radiation therapy. C is your Medicare Advantage plans, as you know. But today we're going to talk about Part D, the drug plans. And when I talk to seniors, I tell them this is such a great time to be a senior coming into Medicare or being on Medicare, because prior to 2003, we didn't have much in the way of prescription drug coverage. We had the Medigap plans, H, I, and J. So the J gave $6,000 in coverage, but it was 50%, so $3,000. And some of the Medicare Advantage plans, you maybe got $800 a quarter, $1,800 a year. There wasn't a lot of prescription drug coverage. So when the prescription drug coverage came in that started in 2006, we finally had a robust prescription drug program. But with the negotiations with the drug companies, they brought in a 3-tiered program, initial, gap, and catastrophic, which is a lot different from the individual and the group plans, which is probably one of the most challenging areas to describe to seniors, as you well know. But the thing to remind them is we have such a better prescription drug plans available to them than the seniors had, their grandparents had. So this is a terrific opportunity for them. Original Medicare, you'll notice it says doesn't cover deductibles and copays. It does not cover outpatient prescription drugs. So new this year, and I think this slide got turned around somewhere, is IRMA. And so I'm going to come back to that one. I don't know how that got into there, but we shall go there. So one of the things that when people purchase their Medicare drug coverage is that they are subject to the Part D IRMA plan. If they earn less than $97,000 as individuals and $194 on a joint tax return, or if they're married filing joint separate term, then if they earn less than that, they don't pay anything more for their Part D other than their monthly premium. However, starting in 2023, we're looking back at 2021, and you'll notice that the IRMA amounts have changed for that. So this is something that you can pull these charts. This is right off of Medicare.gov, so that you can discuss this with your seniors to talk about how much IRMA is going to cost them. Now, the thing that people miss on the IRMA, the income adjustment, is that it only applies if you have a prescription drug coverage, whether it's in a Medicare Advantage plan or a standalone D plan. So just be aware of that it only applies. And then also if people are Medi-Medis, full Medi-Medis, or they're on low income subsidy program, the extra program, or the so those people don't pay for IRMA as well. So if someone's is subject to the low income subsidy program, then they will not pay these amounts. And we'll talk a little bit about it here. Now, if someone had a higher income, they had a capital gain in 2021, but they've retired in 2023, and they don't have that income, they can file a life change form. They can appeal with IRMA. So this form is actually on the Social Security website. It's the SSA 44 form. It's about 8 pages that an individual can file to have Medicare not have that IRMA charge applied to them. This is for both B and for D. One thing is a reminder on this form: the couple don't file jointly on this file. They need to each file a form with Social Security. And it doesn't say where to send it, but it's sent to Social Security, or you could submit it to the local office. But this form is very important for anybody who wants to appeal their higher IRMA charges. So that's something that if you might want to carry with you when you meet with people and discuss it with them, if they just had a one-time event, like they sold their mother's home after their mother's passed away, so they had a one-time capital gain. So this is a very helpful form to you for you to be aware of, especially with the B and the D charges. So drug plans, Medicare has minimum requirements. And so you've heard the phrase creditable coverage. So Medicare considers creditable coverage is that it's at least equal to the deductible of $505, which is the new deductible this year, and $75 paid by the plan, 25% paid by the individual. And when I talk to seniors, I say, that letter you got when you received from your company every year, or it may be directly from the plan that said, oh, your plan is creditable. And you look at it and you said, okay, great. And they throw it in the trash can. They said, I don't know what that means. Well, that's what it means. So that if you have seniors that are retiring past age 65, we need to know if that plan is creditable. And Medicare actually looks at that to make sure the plan is creditable. So that's what that means. It's equal to $505 deductible actuarially, and $75 paid by the company and 25% paid by the individual. And plans have a minimum requirement, that threshold I talked about, but they can increase the benefits, but they cannot fall below that 505, 75, 25 split. Now, standalone premium prescription drug plans have a monthly premium. The plans apply for the whole state. And we have here in California, we're from a low of $4.50 on up to close to $200, depending on the formulary, depending on the drug, on the deductible or not deductible. So you have a lot of variety of plans, and we have plans all the way from a 2.5 to a 4.5 rating. Average, we have between 3 and 4. Most of your plans are at least 3 that you want to take and look at. And the plans all have different formularies, different tiers, different copayment amounts. And I will tell you that do not assume that the formulary is the same for all of the company's plans. As you know, the formularies may be different for each plan, and that's why you need to change them. And one, as I mentioned, as I take a look, not only IRMA, but we also have the late enrollment penalty if people do not enroll during their initial enrollment period and they did not have a creditable plan. Now, those late penalties come into play when they enroll in a plan that has prescription drug coverage, whether it's an MAPD or a PDP. So some plans require network pharmacies. So it's important to see what is their preferred pharmacy, what's their standard pharmacies. A couple of the MAPD plans this year have even decided that they've not contracted with a number of independent pharmacies like they used to. So it is an out-of-network pharmacy. So one of my favorite little pharmacies in my town that happened to. So you really need to take a look to see, is the pharmacy in the network? And that's why when you look at the Medicare.gov or some of the other quoting sites, that it's important that you put the pharmacy in, because it does make a difference if they're in or as a preferred network or a standard network as to how much they're going to be paying in their drug copays, but also the danger of being out of network. Higher income, as I mentioned, that's the IRMA. They have to live in the service area of the plan, and that is the plans are filed by the state for the prescription drug plans. And again, most plans allow a person to be out of area up to 6 months, and then Medicare will take another look and say, oh, we need to put you on a plan for that state that you went to. And I want to point something out. When you're talking to seniors, you know, we're not allowed to say best. You're always saying this may be the best plan for you. This appears to be the plan that best fits your needs. And I think when you're talking with them, that's a phrase you really want to use. Best fits your needs. And never say definitively it will lower your premiums. You always need to put that disclaimer in there of may help. It appears it will, it may help. That's a little compliance statement for you to help you, especially as our calls are being recorded, that you're being very clear and upfront with your clients. Because remember, formularies can change during the year. We're spending all this time right now looking at the drug plans, looking at the MAPD drug formularies, making sure we're matching our clients up the best we can. And lo and behold, after 60 days, they can change the formulary. So you have to let your applicants and your clients know it's all subject to change, and that's why you're so important to them, to help them through the year on their programs. And always remember that if there is a change in the drug formulary, the company has to give them their first month at cover it, but after that, it would be subject to the new rules and the levels and so forth. So that's something to keep in mind. People that are on the long-term care, the other type of drugs, they're in the nursing homes, they have 90 days if there's a change, but the regular person has 30 days. So for example, Invokana, on one of my clients' plans, Invokana is not covered on their formulary. That drug is very expensive. And so they'll get it the first month of January, but they're going to have their doctor make an appeal to have that drug covered for the rest of the year. So to make sure that it is covered, and it'll most likely be covered at tier 4 non-preferred brand, because Invokana is not on their formulary. So that's another thing you need to look at when you look at the drug plans, is that you do have that 30-day period and appeal. Because you never know, someone may come up with having a drug like Invokana in the middle of the year and it's not on their formulary. So what do? So that's the process. The doctor takes and makes an appeal and explains about the drug. So as I mentioned, the D plans are available through standalone or Medicare Advantage plans. The plans will vary in cost depending on their formulary, depending if there's a deductible, and there is a late enrollment penalty, and we'll go over that in just a moment, because it's 1% of the national average premium each year. So this year, the new national average premium is $32.74. So the penalty is actually calculated by the number of months that they were not covered at the 1% per month. So it would be rounded off to the nearest 10 cents actually. So here is a list of all of the costs for the drugs ever since the program started. So you notice when it started in 2006, it was at $32.20. Well, now, and if you go up through it, you'll notice it has rocked back and forth. Our most expensive year was 2017, where the average plan cost $35.63. And then it's gone down, went up a little last year, but this year it's come down a little bit. So $32.74 is the base premium nationally. So here's a picture you can see just visually from that graph standpoint of how the accrual of the late enrollment penalty builds. So you can see that it keeps going and going for people that didn't enroll. But there is a cap on how many months that they would pay. So here's an example of how they do the creditable. Now, you can say an example to them, but it is Medicare that will actually set what the penalty is. They're the ones who will tell the individual what they're paying. Social Security comes into play here and takes a look. So here is a Mrs. Martinez. She didn't have coverage from 2018 to 2020. Her penalty in 2023 is 29% because she was not covered for 29 months. So back in 22, so right now, her penalty calculates out to $968. So it's 29 times 33.37, and then it's rounded to the nearest 10 cents. So her penalty is $970. So if she took a plan, let's say with a premium of $10, her penalty of $970, she would pay $970 a month. So, and she would pay that for the full year. So in 2023, they're going to take, and because the penalty went down, she's going to $32.74. So 29% is now $949.10. So now she's at $950. So it's actually gone down for her year. It's not a cumulative every year from all those charts I've shown you. It is how many months based at that year's rate. So that's important. A lot of agents have misunderstood that. They thought it was cumulative. No, it's how many months were you not covered that you should have been covered, and then we multiply it to the new year's penalty. So I hopefully that'll help you as you're speaking with your clients. So the member is not responsible for calculating their own premium, and the maximum penalty is 148 months. So there is a ceiling, which is good news, because I've run into some people that did not get coverage in 2006, and all of a sudden they want some expensive drugs. And members can appeal coverage, appeal the penalty. Now, important thing to remember, VA coverage is considered credible, not for medical, but for prescription drug coverage. So people that are subject to VA benefits, full benefits, should not be subject to the penalty, but once in a while that slips through. So your client can appeal to have that removed. So, and then a reminder, extra help, low income subsidy, people who are Medis are not subject to the late enrollment penalties. So when you're talking about Medicare Part D, one of the things that your client really needs to understand when they look at the plans is the terms. So we have the formulary. Medicare has a huge formulary. Our thyroid is not on it, by the way, but it has a huge formulary. And the plans pick which drugs they want to put on their formulary. They're required to have 2 drugs out of each category of drug. So for example, 2 statins. They may have a bigger formulary, but they must have at least 2. And so that's why it's so important to look at the formulary. And you know, when you meet with a doctor, I worked with some doctors, and one back a few years ago when it wasn't so automated, I was at his office and we were talking, and I said, how do you work with the formularies? And he says, you know, the client really has to bring in their formulary or printout of what they're looking at. He says, because he pointed to a shelf that was literally 12 feet long and about 6 feet high. And he says, that's the formularies of all the plans I work with. He says, I have it, but he says, I don't have time to sit down and go through it. So the client really, he says, my patient really has to come in with some alternatives to know what's on their plan when we talk about alternative drugs. So the patient needs to work with their doctor on this. And this is where you can help them to understand how to get their formulary information, how to look it up on the computer or so forth. If they're not computer literate, you're there to help them. Copay, the copay is the share of cost for the individual, and it's paid by the health plan. The step therapy, that is in the formulary. And many times when agents present and look at the formulary, they're not quite looking to see if there is a step therapy if there's a quantity limit, which shows, so this step therapy shows as an ST, quantity limit as a QL, and then there's pre-authorization. So in a number of your expensive drugs, you will see PA on it. And so it's very important that when you look at the formulary that you make sure that to check to see if there's a step therapy QL or if there is a PA. Now, unfortunately, on some of the quoting systems, they don't go down that deep. Most of them do. So make sure when you look at the detail that see if there's an SL, QA, QL, or a PA, because if not, that's an allegation just sitting waiting to come out under the rock and bite you. So you need to make sure you cover that. Tier is important. Co-payments or co-insurance amounts depends on the tier. That's where we're looking at the preferred generic, preferred brand, non-preferred brand, and specialty drugs. And so that's where you're looking. Some plans may have 5 tiers. Some plans may have 6 tiers. Depends on the plan themselves. And the important thing to realize is depending on the cost of the drug, there may be some brand drugs that are listed in the generic level, and in the brand level, the preferred brand, you may have generic drugs listed because they're more expensive. So that's one thing that when you're looking at the drugs, assume that every generic drug is strictly generic or every brand is strictly brand. So that's why you look closely at the formulary. This is one of my favorite slides when I present to seniors. And this slide really helps to explain the 3 tiers. Some plans talk about 4 tiers because they pull the deductible out separately. But as you know from taking the AHIP test and going through all the plans and testing, you know that this year the initial coverage limit has gone to $4,660, may or may not include a deductible on the plan. There are some plans that offer a lower deductible, but they may not offer a higher deductible. And most of the Medicare Advantage plans do not have deductibles. Some of the PPOs do, but most of the MAPDs do not. So when they are in the initial coverage, the plan's costs are divided between the insurance company and the individual. So, for example, Januvia, a preferred brand on one company, it may be $47. But the rest of the cost of Januvia, which is about $500, is paid by the insurance company, the plan, until the total amount of drugs spent between the individual and the plan reaches $4,660, they go into the coverage gap or the donut hole. So when we first started in 2006, there was no coverage in the donut hole. It was just not there. But then over the years, Medicare has made changes. So the great news is, and this is what I tell my seniors when I meet with them, it's such a great time to be a senior because you've got coverage in the coverage gap. And let me explain how that works. So for brand drugs that are on the formulary, and that's important to add that in on the formulary, you will then switch from paying a copay or a different co-insurance amount to paying 25% for the brand drug. Hang on just a second. So that would be 25% of the negotiated rate for the drug. So it depends. That's where it makes a difference. One, is it a preferred pharmacy or non-preferred pharmacy? Because it makes a difference on those copays. Or is it an out-of-network pharmacy because it's not going to be covered? So they're going to pay 25% for the brand drugs. On the generic drugs, it depends on what kind of plan they're on. If they're on a Medicare Advantage plan, prescription drug plan, most of the time they will be continuing to pay the drug copays for their generic drugs, tier 1 and tier 2. So those just continue on. On the standalone drug plans, you're going to be paying 25% of the negotiated rate. Okay. So there may be a dispensing fee as well during this period, at 2 to 5 is average. And you stay in the gap, the individual stays in the gap until they hit $7,400. But here's what people don't understand is what's changed about this is that anything you paid, anything the senior paid in the initial coverage period, they themselves paid, the deductible, the co-payment, the co-insurance amount applies against that $7,400. So it's not really 7,400. It really comes in, somewhere around 7,000. So it's less. And so when you're doing the calculations, you don't see the 7,400 because you have those co-pays, that deductibles, the co-insurance amount coming in. And it's important for you to know also that how it's paid is the individuals paying their share, the 25%. The drug companies are paying 70%, and the insurance companies are paying 5%. So there's a switch in here, just for your information. And that's how the drugs are paid in this coverage gap. And what's interesting is there's some drugs that actually become cheaper because of the 25% in the coverage gap. So it's a drug by drug, formulary by formulary, negotiated by negotiated thing. So it changes. So once an individual hits 7,400, they go into catastrophic coverage. And in catastrophic, when they've spent the 7,400, then they will be paying 5% or 4.5 or 10.35. If it's greater, so it's 4.15 for the generics, 10.35 for the brands. But if it's greater than the 10.35 or the 4.15, they're going to go to 5%. So in the case of the Januvia, we go from a $47 copay to 25% of $500 to 5% of $500. So we're paying a lot less for that drug. So that's how that flows through. And when Medicare set up this program, they figured that 80% of the seniors would not go into the coverage gap. Unfortunately, today that number has grown because of the expense of the drugs and what's happening. But we've got some great news for seniors this year, thanks to the Inflation Act. So we'll touch on those shortly. Just to mention on extra help, anyone can help someone with extra help. And that program it's a program. It is not welfare. It is a program available for seniors. You find the information in Social Security's website. And I will tell you, and the application is there, and it makes a difference in people's lives. I had an individual I met with that he said, I'd love to provide you something to eat, but he says, my cat and I have a can of tuna fish and a can of fruit cocktail to last us 10 days until I get my next check, because I just paid $128 for my drugs. And so we got him on a low income program. We applied for it right then and there. Fortunately, I'd met with a client prior there that ran a food bank, and I was, with his permission, we called her and she came over with groceries within the hour and cat food and kind of food. But it's amazing what you can do in our community. You make a difference for seniors. And this program is important. And as you're doing meetings with seniors, mention it as a way that they can help other seniors that they know, that this low-income subsidy program makes a difference in people's lives so that they can get their drugs. And there's several tiers available, as you know, with the Medi-Cal program, but there's several tiers, but they can afford to take their drugs. Plans are rated from 1 to 5, as I mentioned before, and you do need to mention the star rating. And remember, the ratings just came out, so the ones printed in the booklets you have are not the ratings that apply now. So remember to order your ratings and be up to date on them. Another area that's a gotcha, if you know. Okay, so there's the Medicare finder, but unfortunately with that, you can't retain those records. So it's good information. And I will tell you, at the beginning of the year, it's not accurate. There are problems with it. So especially, it's usually not on the inexpensive generic drugs, but if you're looking at very expensive drugs, then you need to take and look at the plan's formulary as well. And so I would say if you can use the program that's offered with your company, I would do it. But consider Medicare.gov as a backup. As I said, they're not always accurate at the beginning of the year. And so I would take and look at it, and you put in their drugs, make sure to indicate if they're low income subsidy or not, if they're on Medicare, Medi-Cal, so that you get the right calculations on the plans. You add the drugs. So at least you've got to start to take a look at. If you are using Medicare.gov, always, always, always print out what you looked at so that you have a document of what you provided the individual or showed them. Just a reminder, you need to check the pharmacy and check on the plan results. Fortunately, you can put in a number of pharmacies, and a number of the quoting systems allow you, because sometimes they go to Costco and sometimes they go to Walgreens, and people do different things. So just a part. Always know your preferred and non-preferred things. Make sure the senior understands that drugs can change during the year. Just know long-term care facilities, when you're ordering drugs with them, they are typically treated as standard. Those, if you're looking at the long-term care drugs, it's typically those are punch-out cards are what they're providing. And when people are traveling, sometimes they may not have access to their pharmacies. And so they can call customer service to see if the drug's available. We've had some challenges this year, especially during the COVID time, that some of the pharmacies ran out of the drugs. And so calling customer service and getting approval to get their drug at another pharmacy has occurred for folks. So they work with customer service to help the client in that area. I think the COVID drug comes to mind a lot of times when people got COVID with the special drug that came up. Not all pharmacies were carrying it. So, okay. So what if their prescriptions are not on the plan? They can ask their doctor to appeal. There's a regular appeal, there's expedited appeals, so the doctor can appeal. You can use discount programs. There's things like GoodRx and NiceRx. Some of the people like to go to Canada for their drugs. Just remember, it is still not a legal option. So they could have their drugs confiscated by the US Post Office. It has happened. But that option is there. There is a company in Florida, a gentleman that speaks many times to us for the associations. The Canadian drugstore actually gets drugs from Canada, and it's all perfectly legal. So that's an opportunity. You can work on drugs. A number of states use state pharmaceutical assistance programs. And so unfortunately, California does not have that. They have a different program, but there's different programs available. So I want to share with you some ideas. And I'm going to be sending this huge printout to Sarah to share with you guys. And I'll give you an example of what we have on here. And so what California has is a program for Medicare recipients. So that's their program. But the pharmacy program we have, there's a number of them that's available. Let me see if I can come in with some. So we have GoodRx, Single Care, Link Health, Script Save, WellX, RX Saver, which was acquired by GoodRx. We have a lot of different programs available, so this will help. There's also, when you're looking at the expensive plans, you need to take a look to see if there's a manufacturing program. So actually, for example, Eliquis has a manufacturing program that people can apply for to go to a zero copay for that drug. And so you can assist your clients by actually looking to see on those more expensive drugs if there is a manufacturing program. Now, on some of them, they do not cover if the person's on Medicare. On other plans, they do. So it's just worth inquiring. Another thing that doctors may say is, well, split pills. You can get a higher dosage at a less price and split the pills, but you need to have that under the supervision of a doctor to see if they say if that would be all right. Work with the doctor for an RX alternative. Many of your seniors think only the brand works. So many times the generic works just as well. What's the difference between the brand and generic? Most of the time, it's the fillers. It's what makes the pill the pill. So there's some drugs. Synthroid is an example of a drug that many people cannot tolerate the generic for. So if they say, I take the brand Synthroid, look it up as the brand Synthroid. Do not substitute the generic if they're specific about that. Most of the time, you can ask the individual, they'll give you the brand name, and when you question them a little more, what are you paying for it? You'll find out they're taking the generic for that drug. Ask for free samples. This is less and less these days. The drug detail people are not handing out free samples as much as they used to, but they are still available. I know a couple of years ago, my husband for his Januvia got 6 months worth of Januvia. Oh, I'm sorry. So that most people have that opportunity. But what I tell my seniors is to take and ask for it in the first 2 quarters, because everybody goes in the donut hole usually early September, August. And so everybody's starting to go to the doctor. Oh, do you have any free samples? If you ask for them in January, February, then you can push things out towards the end of the year. So just to prevent, and use preventive care. Keep yourself healthy so you don't, I tell the seniors, don't fall into needing the drug. And one of the most important things, shop around and compare prices, because it depends on the plan. There's a difference between Rite Aid, Walgreens, Costco, Humana, with Walmart. So you really have to take a look and say what makes, it's wonderful to have loyalty. It's wonderful to love your pharmacist, but it may cost you a lot of money to keep that relationship going. So you have to warn the seniors that something, I tell them now, this is managing your prescription drugs has become your new financial hobby. It really is, because for you to effectively use your program, you've got to understand how your drugs are covered, and you shouldn't be throwing money away that you could have in your pocket by using an incorrect pharmacy. So that's so important to them. As I mentioned, go to the manufacturer's program. There's income requirements. Some may not allow Medicare covered persons to be covered. We have a problem with seniors not storing their medicines properly. We had a close friend whose mother OD'd because she kept her prescription drugs in a shoebox and took them by color, not by the name, just I take this drug, I take that drug. So proper management of their medicines is so important to the seniors. There are some plans that omeprazole, can they take generic versus the prescription drugs? They need to work out with their doctors. Another thing you can talk about with your clients, it's not so much the time when you're selling the plans, but when you're dealing with your clients, is have them review their true out-of-pocket cost report monthly, the TROOP report. That'll show you how their drug use is flowing through cost-wise and what's being charged against their gap and their catastrophic coverage. I usually tell my seniors, if you hit catastrophic coverage in November, see if you can, or September or December, load up on those drugs, because they're expensive. So why not load up on them, such as the Januvia? Get the 3 months supply, for goodness sake, and that'll give you a supply to last for drugs that you can. There are some they only allow monthly, but if they can, again, it's managing their drug program efficiently. You need to look for the sources. I mentioned it before, GoodRx, RX Saver. These are many of the names of the companies that are available to you. I know Mark Cuban started a program. It's mostly generics, but it's another great pricing. So prescription drug prices are continuing to go up. But as I mentioned, they vary by the pharmacy. Generics can be tweaked. Oh, sorry about that. The donut hole is not eliminated. It's as low as it's going to go. The donut hole, it's gone away to the point there will be the donut hole. But the new Inflation Act will affect that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So in 2022, with the Inflation Reduction Act, if a drug is raised more than the rate of general inflation, manufacturers will have to rebate the excess. So no more them going wild and woolly. They can only go to the general inflation rate, the CPI. In 2023, there's a number of changes, and this is exciting news that you can share with your clients. And there's a number of agents that are not that sharp to share with their potential salespeople. So here's a nice way to show you're the smart one on the street. For extra help, they've actually increased the threshold. So more and more people can qualify for extra help than before. So that's great news. Premiums for Part D plans cannot increase more than 6%, at least to 2029. So no more are we going to have these huge jumps in plans. The biggest news, I think, is that insulins are now capped at $35. The deductible does not apply, and it's covered through the gap. So all of a sudden, things like Novolog and some of the others are now at $35. They can be lower at $25. The senior savings program still continues on with those drugs that are listed on that as well. But on the insulins, just make sure that the insulin is covered on the formulary. So it's not every insulin. You still have to look at the formulary, but you'll notice now in the calculations that it's showing the $35. However, I'm not sure, I didn't get a chance to check this morning if Medicare has corrected their website. When Medicare came live on October 1st, they did not have the $35 in there. So they were telling us, well, run the formulary with the insulins and then rerun it without the insulins in it. Hence why it's better to use a program such as offered by Sarah's company. So it'll be more accurate. So insulins are capped. There are some plans that are going down to 25, but I will tell you, I had a lady the other day break out in tears because this made such a difference in her life right now. So this is a major change. And then vaccines. Shingrix, has been a preferred brand drug if it's covered under the plan's formulary. Next year, it's $0 if it's on the formulary. And as I work with my seniors, I always say my favorite phrase is $0. This is $0. So vaccines, like we get the flu shots, we get the COVID shots, but now the Shingrix shot, the shingles shot is now falling into that arena. And then the big news is in 2025, Part D will be capped at $2,000. So stay tuned, but I have no clue. It's going to be interesting what that's going to do to the Part D plans. Are we going to be selling Part D plans? What is it going to do with that cap at 2,000? So the end of 2024, when we start doing our AHIP or the NAHU certification, it's going to be interesting, folks, because not sure what's going to happen with that. So the other thing that came about is that Medicare was given the power to negotiate prices, but they're starting just with a few drugs at a time. And basically it's going to go through a number of plans through the year that it'll just be taking up a bit of it. So 10 and then 10 and then 10. So just be aware of that. It's certain drugs will be on that. They're going to allow safe importation. We need to have them allow drugs to come in from Canada and the European Union. We need more access to generic drugs. The donut hole at 25% is still not acceptable. And we need to increase the price transparency. For you as agents, you need to speak to your clients at least annually. Help them you could help them with Medicare.gov or with the program such as Sarah has is a great way to work with them. Review the program, always print out your results. Remind your client to watch their troop report. They should know where they are in their drug use and the costs that are coming. So always be available to provide service. So with that, that's just a general overview of what's going on in prescription drugs. The thing to remember, I always tell my people, it's looking at plans is a little bit like wearing a hospital gown. You're never sure what's covered. So, and the other thing I tell them, Mark Twain has a great thing that says no one is safe as long as Congress is in session. So we don't have a crystal ball, but we can deal with what we have now. So you have better plans, more coverage than we've ever had before in Medicare, and you will make a difference in people's lives. And so with that, I thank you. I hope that helped and you were able to glean some information.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Maggie. I personally learned a lot through that presentation. So now we'll open it up for Q&A, and there is a raise hand button at the bottom of Zoom. Because it's a small group, we can just have people raise their hand. I'll allow them to come off of mute and you can ask your question. While people are thinking of the questions that they want to ask, I'll go ahead and ask one. You mentioned earlier in the presentation that medicare.gov can often be inaccurate in the first few weeks of AEP, and we saw that. We heard agents talking about it. Do you have any advice, given we all just went through this crazy period where the drug prices on medicare.gov were changing? What do you do during that time?
I make a point of, if it's an expensive drug, I check the plan's formulary, number one, just to see what tier they're at, to make sure they're at the right tier. But quite frankly, I really depend on programs other than medicare.gov to give me the information. I will look at GoodRx and a couple of the plans just so I have a feel for what the price is in the marketplace to see if it's what is near that. So, but you always have to say to the client when you're running it, it's an estimation.
Right. And it does seem around 10:15 is when all the data gets properly loaded into medicare.gov and becomes accurate again.
Well, most of the time.
Most of the time.
There still are errors that can occur.
Sure.
That's why you always say it's an estimate.
Right. I'll read a question from Scott, which is, will we share the list of other carriers in addition to GoodRx, the other drug discount programs?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem with GoodRx is they're connected with e-health insurance. So if your client goes to GoodRx, they will be contacted by e-health insurance. So just beware. They will get those phone calls.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so just warn their clients that they're giving implied permission for these plans to call them, and that's many ways why they get these phone calls. So keep your client.
Building on that question, do you have any advice for how agents can efficiently look up drugs across multiple different discount programs? I know the list you're about to share has dozens of different programs, and is it a matter of going website by website by website and doing sort of your own manual calculation? How do you do that in an efficient way?
Well, I probably use maybe one or two of them that I know quite well. And so I would just take and just come used to using one or two. I don't think you don't need to go wild with them. I would say get acquainted with one or two of them that you're comfortable with, and I think you can spend too much time going through all of them. And most of the newer ones are just on generic drugs anyway. So
makes sense. All right.
Make your time.
Exactly. If others have questions, feel free to, again, raise your hand or you can type in the Q&A function. Maybe while we're waiting for other questions to come in, I'd love to actually just show one piece of technology we've developed at FairStreet that actually helps with this drug coverage piece. I know there are many existing, folks on the line that use FairStreet already, but just to spend about 2 minutes on this, I'm going to share my screen and show you. So this is the FairStreet CRM platform that helps agents just very easily get access to updated drug and pharmacy information from their clients. So I'm here on the clients tab. These are all my clients with their coverages. And let's say it's AEP and I need to do a plan review for one of my clients. So I'm going to go down and find someone that I haven't done this for. So Paula. I'm going to grab her AEP form link. And I do want to ask her for doctors because she's on an MAPD plan, let's say. So I'm going to copy this link. You could also email it to her. You could text it to her. I'm going to show you from Paula, the client's perspective, what she would see. So now we're on the senior's perspective here, and it's very personalized. So this is my account. So it's my contact information up at the top. Imagine it's yours. And so it's coming from you as the agent with this friendly message explaining what AEP is and what action to take. The client can either decline a review, or in most cases, they'll get started and give you their updated prescriptions and they want you to review their plan. So I'll put in a zip code. They'll get ready to add their prescriptions, go to their pill cabinet most likely, and they can just start typing in different drugs. And we try to make this easy with a drop down so you don't end up with typos. And it will prompt them if they put in a brand name drug, hey, are you actually taking the generic? From there, the client just needs to put in their dosage. They can modify the frequency if it's not the default. Click add prescription. I'll just do this one, but imagine someone's putting in 3, 4, 5 different prescriptions. They can add notes because we know that people have all sorts of notes that they need to give to their agent about the way that they're actually taking their drugs. So maybe this person takes it as needed. It'll pull in pharmacies from that zip code. Ask if they're open to mail order. And then this last piece here is pulling in doctors from the zip code that the person indicated. And you can either move the map around, or you can even search by hospital system. Like I'm in San Francisco, so maybe I need to search for UCSF, but I'll just grab this Dr. Mann. And the last piece here is a general question of how satisfied are you with your plan? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Maybe this person hates it, and they'll probably tell you why, but I'll just put in that brief note. So at that point, the client submits their information. They can optionally, this is something you can add, you can put in a link to book so that your clients can book an appointment with you right here. But if I go back over to your agent view, I can see now that the client has submitted their form. All the notes that they put into that form are right here, and the doctor, the pharmacy, and the prescription are all tied to their profile. And then the last piece is I can just hit start quote for 2023, and all that information will get pushed into Connecture, which is a really common quoting tool, so that you can just at a glance start looking at the plans and figuring out what's going to be the lowest, best coverage at the lowest price. So I'll stop the demo here, but wanted to offer that as another tool in your arsenal when it comes to managing drug coverage. Mary is raising her hand. Mary, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good morning, Sarah, and
Hi,
thanks so
Mary.
much for the overview there from our host speaker today. I really wanted you to go a tad bit further, Sarah, on that on the explanation or the screen share that you were doing, and run a quote, because right now my immediate issue is really figuring out what portion of the deductible, that I can actually say, to a client that, you'll be paid, off top for your drugs. I will see that some of them will show the retail cost of the drug. I mean, that line item comes up. And then, there's the portion before the gap and so on. But I really am not comfortable, or I'm finding myself second guessing. Am I advising a client when I run a quote and I'm looking at how it reads across, the line there, that, okay, well, it looks like you're, a higher cost of med, whatever label you want to give it. It looks like this drug is going to cost you $1,000, a couple of months.
Let me go back into the quoting tool here. And Maggie, do you use Connecture for quoting? Do you use this tool?
Yeah, I use Connecture.
Okay. Well, actually, I would love, Maggie, do you want to explain how you talk about this question with your clients and where you go to look at what is the deductible for that plan? What are the,
Yeah, if you
out-of-pocket costs?
click on the plan details.
Plan details, yes.
Yeah, so that's
Mhm.
important. You got to look at two things. You got to look at the plan details. So if you go down, then you talk about the plan and the formulary, and it actually, you talk about what the levels are. And it'll actually show their drugs and what level they're at.
Mhm.
But what you need to, so see that on the atorvastatin,
Mhm.
it's $2 and then it's 0 before the gap, because the welfare
Mhm.
value script covers the tier 1 and tier 2 drugs. But to really see it, and notice this program shows you the PA, the QL, and the ST. Go to total estimated cost, because that's really where you need to talk with your clients. And so if you scroll down, you'll be able to tell them, and the program bases it on you getting the drug every month, or unless you've picked, what, if you pick 2 months, 3 months, it's just following what you picked. It can't, because clients buy them at different times. But this,
Okay.
so that's why you always say it's an estimate based on. And so it'll take the flow through. So for someone that takes a number of drugs, it may all of a sudden come up to where you see in May or June, they're in the donut hole. And there
Yeah.
is, it's not a full, it's not a boom, it's a move into type of thing. And so once you've used up your deductible, then it'll start to, because they have to meet the deductible first. So they're not paying the full amount when they're in that change period. They balance bill them, so to speak. So if you hit the 505, the rest of the bill, so the calculations work that way. And so but use this tab so that you can really show the how it flows through. So especially when you have people with a number of drugs, it's very important that you can say, oh, it looks like they estimate in May you're going to go into the gap, and here's what your estimated cost is. It depends on how you get your drugs. This will change, when you get your drugs, how many drugs you get, but you could give them the best estimate. So I use this total estimate really when I'm talking with the senior. So they keep the flow.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, and I guess just to finish that last piece, for instance, on WellCare, who is offering, 0 cost, on the tier 1 and 2s, if it's showing here, the $2, retail, and WellCare is a plan that does have a 505 deductible, are they looking at the $2 first that will come out of their pockets first before they transition into a 0 deductible copay? Or is it 0 deductible?
If you had a plan that had the deductible, it would apply. This one, the $2 is not the deductible's not even play for those. It'll come in only on the brand drugs. So you don't have to worry about that deductible on your generic drugs.
Okay. All right. So no deductible.
It goes to 50 cents though.
Okay, well, maybe we should have used a higher cost drug. So
Right, this is a bad example. And Mary, I'm happy to also go over this kind of offline with you as well, but hopefully seeing these 3 tabs is helpful to know where to look.
Because this truly shows you the flow. And so when I have a client, for example, that has, this is where the insulins really show well. You can see the $35 coming in. And when you're talking about in the gap, it'll still show them at $35. So it's great this year that you can show them, like for the Novolog or the Lantus, it's 35.
Okay.
That's a great thing to show them, that they can actually see how that program's working.
All right. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Mary. All right, everyone. I will wrap us up here. This has been incredibly helpful, Maggie. Thank you so much for your time and for answering our questions and teaching us how to use Connecture. Incredibly valuable, especially this time of year. So, go ahead.
If you have clients on the Aetna Smart RX plan, you can click on non-licensed plans to still see that plan. A lot of agents don't realize that. Sorry to interrupt you, but you can click on that plan so that you can still see. Even though we're not selling the Smart RX plan for $4.50, you can still get it for the comparison purposes by clicking on non-licensed plan. So see that where it says
it's right here where my mouse is hovering.
Yeah, a lot of agents don't realize, and then you can see the Aetna Smart RX plan.
Right. And you could actually see all of the plans in that zip code, including the ones that you're not licensed with.
Yeah.
So it's loading, but you can see.
Yeah, so all of a sudden you see it comes up.
Mhm. Perfect. All right. Thanks for that, Maggie. Appreciate it. And as a reminder, we did record this. We will send it out afterwards, and we'll follow up with a list of prescription drug savings programs as well. So thanks very much for being with us, Maggie.
Take care and good selling. Have fun. Bye.